Hi, I'm Brian Lekander of the U.S. Department of Education's Ready to Learn television program. As part of the Ed Games Expo, I'm here to introduce a PBS KIDS video entitled How the Learning Game Was Made. It focuses on an innovative learning game for early learners or young kids ages 4 to 8. At Ready to Learn, our job is to provide funding for creative and talented people to make educational television shows and digital learning games. If you watch PBS television, or if you play games on PBS KIDS, you may have seen some of the shows that we support. Molly of Denali, Hero Elementary, Peg Plus Cat, and Eleanor Wonders Why are just a few of them. Ready to Learn TV shows are fun to watch, and the games are fun to play. We think they're as entertaining as any children's media that you'll find. But in addition to having fun, kids will also gain skills in subjects like reading or science that will help them do well in school. That's why Ready to Learn media are often used in school classrooms, and even more frequently in community-based outreach programs at places like daycare centers, after-school programs, or libraries. Parents like the media too. In fact, if you're a kid, your parents might want to play some of the games alongside you at home. Now, we're going to watch how our good friends at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Public Broadcasting Service, or PBS, have used Ready to Learn funds to partner with WGBH Public Television in Boston to create a series of learning games for young kids called Team Hamster. The video will feature Melissa Carlson, Senior Digital Producer in Children's Media at WGBH. She created the Team Hamster series and led production of the game that we're going to talk about today. After the video, we'll have a brief Q&A with some young children led by my colleagues Jamila Smith and Carter Volz, in which we'll be joined by Melissa and her colleague Shannon Bishop, the Director of Content with PBS KIDS Digital, who also works on pbskids.org website and the PBS KIDS Games app. We hope you enjoy.
Hi, I'm Melissa Carlson, and I produce games and apps for kids at GBH in Boston. And I'm so excited to be here today to talk to you about how me and my team make learning games for kids. I'm going to share a behind-the-scenes look at a new PBS KIDS digital series, Team Hamster. Team Hamster has games and videos. The characters were even inspired by a game in another series, The Rough Ruffman Show. Team Hamster is produced by GBH and PBS KIDS, and both Team Hamster and The Rough Ruffman Show are part of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and PBS KIDS Ready to Learn initiative, funded by the Department of Education. So what's Team Hamster? It's a digital series that asks kids to build, test, and redesign to solve problems and save the day. Our hamsters are Sadie, Mateo, and Tasha, and they are classroom pets by day, secret engineers by night, and they need your help. Kids step into the hamster's world through animated stories integrated with games. The stories set up problems kids help solve by playing games, using simple machines, tools, and creative thinking. And just like the hamsters, kids learn that even though you're small, you can solve it all. Now, when you're making something, it's really important to think about your goals. What do you want to make and what makes it special? These were ours for Team Hamster. We wanted to combine games and video. We wanted those games to inspire stories. We wanted to help kids practice creative thinking and show how engineering is everywhere with everyday materials and problems to solve. And we wanted our games to have free play and maker modes so that there were lots of different ways to play. Now, this is the game in the Rough Ruffman Show that inspired our hamster characters. Ruff also shows up in our videos as the school janitor. And this isn't the only game that inspired a show or a movie. You might also know Angry Birds or Detective Pikachu. There's even a Minecraft movie coming out next year. So up top is how the hamsters looked in the original game, and on the bottom is how we changed them to be stars of their own series with lots of personality. And here they are, the same characters used in both a video and a game. On the left is a screenshot from an episode, setting up what the player needs to do in the game on the right. It's the same hallway, the same paintings, and in this example, we put the game at the end of the episode. So far, for Team Hamster, we've made 5 videos, a website, and 3 games. One game mixes art with simple machines. In another game, you explore how to move water by using tools. And our third game is the one I'm going to talk about today, how we made Roll to the Rescue. So in this game, we're helping the hamsters roll through a bunch of mazes inside the school walls to find their favorite things before Janitor Ruff throws them away. You use simple machines to reach high up places and get around the mazes. And there's a whole part where you can make your own maze and test it out with a hamster. There's also a video that sets up the story and what you'll do in the game. For Roll to the Rescue, we wanted to experiment with something different. The game takes place inside the school's walls in the middle of the story. So that means you need to play the whole game to see how the story ends. Okay, now that you know a little bit about the game, how long do you think it takes to make a game like this? 3 years, 11 months, or 2 weeks? If you said 11 months, you'd be right. That's how long it took us. And there were a lot of us involved in making this game, about 25 different people. Here's all their different titles. I'm a producer, and we do lots of different jobs. We write scripts and make levels, and we keep everyone on schedule and make sure we're working as a really good team. Our coders program how the game works, and our designers create how the game looks. Experts make sure we're meeting our learning goals, and we also have people who make music and test out our games and tell people about the games when they launch. So if you think about what you like to do and the skills you have and the skills you're growing, I bet they can help you make a game. Okay, so now I'll take you through our game making process. These are all the different steps we use, and some of them, like design and improve, we do lots of different times while making a game. And this process is all about trying out ideas, testing, and then making things better. So if you like solving fun problems, you'll like making games. That first step, imagine and plan. Basically, how did we come up with this game idea? Well, I based it on things I like and get excited about, like hamsters. I had a little pet growing up. His name was Peanut, and he was super cute. Some of my favorite games are physics puzzlers and platformers. I also love engineering and the design process and wanted a game where kids could learn that too. And that middle picture is my elementary school. And as a kid, I was always curious about what happened at school at night after we went home. So this game was a way to touch on that. So once we have our basic game idea, it's time to brainstorm the details. So a bunch of the team gets together to talk, think, and write about things like which simple machine should we use and how do players win the game and what happens if they fail. This is when we also start figuring out how the game and the video would go together. The game idea came first, and we worked on the game before making the video. On the left is an early version of the video showing where the game fits in. And on the right is a map we created of the school to help us figure out how all the places in our games and videos work together. Okay, so now let's talk about design. We always start off with sketches, and they help us figure out really basic things like how the player interacts in the game and what's on screen. So that's things like how do the simple machines help you get through the maze? And should you see some of the school while you're playing? Should we put the hamsters in cars? I don't know. How about what size should the hamsters be? We need to make sure you can move them on a little phone screen. And we're also thinking about what kind of buttons do we need? So now that we have our plan and some designs, we build a prototype. That's a first rough draft of a game. It's very basic, and we're not really worried about how it looks. It's all about the mechanic, which is how you interact with the game and move through it. So here's a little demo of this prototype. With this, we wanted to see how kids move the hamster. Did they tap or drag? We wanted to see if that spring was easy to use because you had to press it down a little bit to make it spring. And we wanted to see if the maze was easy or hard to solve. Like, could players get the stars? And so now it's time that we've built this for the fun part to test out our prototype. So who do you think we test with? Hamsters, astronauts, or kids? That's right. We tested each build with about 10 to 12 different kids who were playing on tablets and phones and laptops. And we saw that kids really liked this first version of the game, but we found some stuff we could improve. Moving the hamster, it was okay, but it could be better, especially for some kids who tried to swipe the ball, which we hadn't planned for. We saw that having to press down on the spring for a couple seconds was not great. It was too hard for some kids. And this very first part of the game was the hardest to play. Lots of kids struggled to get the star, and we didn't want the game to be hard at the beginning. So now we've learned all of that, we could also start working on how the game might look. And here are some early designs. We thought this first design was a little too dark, and the pipes sort of meant there wasn't enough space to move around and make fun mazes. We liked the second version a lot more because it was bright and cute like the hamsters. But we still thought it could be better because it was a little busy and hard to tell where you were supposed to go. And the designer who did that artwork also made every piece of art that goes into the game. That includes our simple machines that we had to make sure were accurate with our learning expert, our collectibles that needed to be really fun and easy to see, and then our silly obstacles that we wanted to look really real and fun. And we want everyone to be able to play our game. So we also planned for all the different devices you can play on. And we made this animation to show kids how they can play the game with a keyboard or with their finger. Okay, so let's go back and see how the game is coming along. Here's the second prototype we tested, which had some improvements based on what we learned. Here's a little demo. We made the hamster ball easier to move, and we included 2 levels. This one was a bigger and more challenging level. We wanted to see if kids like that. And there's also some new obstacles like the bubble gum. And we added more simple machines like this pulley and the lever. We also let players change the height of the ramps. So what did kids think? Well, they really liked the game again and didn't want to stop playing, which is great. We also learned that that hard level wasn't too hard. Kids could navigate this longer maze and sort of liked having that challenge. We also learned that these little flags we'd added, which were meant to be like checkpoints, so you knew where you'd been in the maze, kids didn't really understand them and they weren't really using them. So we might take those out. And we learned that our pulley was a little hard for kids to use because their hamster balls kept rolling off. And those new obstacles like gum got a lot of giggles. So we definitely had some stuff to fix and some great stuff to build on. And we ended up making 12 levels for the game. And designing levels is one of my favorite parts of the process. We mapped these levels out using non-game software. This is like an Excel or a Google spreadsheet. And we use color coding for the path and the obstacles. And then after we made this, a designer would use it to build the level with the real art. And then we would all play it and test it with kids to make sure it was just right. Lots of good teamwork. Okay, so the game is really starting to come together now. And because it's a learning game, I wanted to take a moment to show the parts of the game that we think really help kids learn. You get to watch how simple machines work in the video and in Sadie's sketchbook. You get to play with the machines to get you through the maze. And then you get to experiment with them when you create your own game level. Okay, so let's look at that create mode next. This is our alpha. It uses some of our designs and has the game flow, which is the game from the start to the finish. And now that we know how the game works and all the rules, we could build this special mode, which is a way for kids to make their own level. So here's how it works. Your goal is to get the hamster to the flag. You can use all the stuff in the toolbar. There's blocks and simple machines and obstacles and collectibles. And if it doesn't work, you can redesign your maze and try again. And so when we went and tested this with kids, we learned a whole lot. That menu on the bottom, kids didn't see all the buttons, and so they missed out on all the cool stuff they could use. We saw that these tubes were kind of confusing because kids thought the hamster should crawl through them, and that winning your maze happens really fast and is easy to miss. Plus, some kids didn't know they could edit their mazes because our buttons weren't clear enough. So definitely some more stuff to improve. And our next step is beta, where we bring everything together and make the final polished version of the game. We worked with a composer to create music. We found and created sound effects for all the things you interact with, like buttons. We recorded with our actors, 3 really great kids who helped bring our game to life. And when your game is done, you also need to think about how people will find it. If they only see one image, what will it make them think about your game? So here's how we designed the title image for ours. We knew it was important for the characters to be front and center. And then we also, like in the second and third versions, wanted to show what you were doing in the game. And we all along the way, we made sure the text was really readable. So if you were looking at it really small or really big, you could still see the title. And that's it. Then we launch. It's so exciting to share the game with kids everywhere, including all of you. Thank you so much for listening to how this learning game was made. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to be here with our friends from PBS and some of our youngest learner friends as well. I'm glad that you all can join us. I loved the video. Some of what I gathered from it was we can all be secret engineers and that we use our creative thinking to problem solve. Isn't that amazing? I mean, this is something we do every day, whether in school or at home or at play. We are constantly thinking of ways to solve problems. So I love the idea that we're able to come together and hear some more about directly from the creators of this great work, but really hearing from our young people in terms of questions they might have. So what I'd like to do, if you all are comfortable, is just open it up. I think you all have a few questions that you'd like to ask either Shannon or Melissa from our PBS Kids friends. So are there any questions that you all want to ask of them in terms of how the game was developed, what they were thinking when they designed it? Feel free to unmute yourself and just chime in. Or maybe it might be helpful if I kicked us off and just asked a question to kind of get things rolling. How does that sound? Okay, so the first question I had, again, I thought the video was just awesome and well put together, was I'd like to know more about how did you make sure the science was right? Do your developers have to learn science, or do you all use science experts? So Melissa or Shannon, either of you can jump in and sort of answer that question.
Great, I'll hop in. Yeah, I'm Melissa, producer of the game, work with Shannon, and that's such a great question because one of the things that I find so fun about making games is that we get to learn about new things all the time while we're working on them. So I knew a little bit about simple machines, but like not enough to make a game about. I'm working on a game right now that's about canoeing, and so that's new to me. So games are great because you're like always getting to learn. And so for this one, we always work on all of our PBS Kids games with learning experts. So we worked with, I think, 2 different advisors who sort of looked at the initial idea and like how we wanted to use the simple machines and helped us make sure we were thinking about how we would use them the right way. And then they also looked at the designs that we made to make sure we were sort of showing them the right way. And then when kids were using them in the games, they also sort of looked at that really to make sure like all along the way that we were talking about them and showing them the right way. So our team learned, but we had to really depend on those experts like we do in all of our games to make sure we were really getting the learning across in the best way.
So Jennifer, I see your light. Did you have a question?
What if complicated machines outside and simple machines inside?
Awesome. I really love that idea. I think you're really thinking like a game designer because the idea of like having something simple in one place and complicated in another is like that's one of the ways that we think about like how to structure games and like help kids learn and then grow and do more. So I really like that idea. I think one of the hardest things when we're making games is we often have so many awesome ideas and we're trying to figure out like which are the ones we can make. So when we were figuring out should it be simple machines or should it be more complicated machines, that was one of the things that we talked about as games designers. And we try and, part of my job as a producer is to figure out, how much time do we have to make the game? How big can the game be? How long? And so that's how we decide something like, will it be simple machines or complicated machines? But I actually really think a complicated machines game would be super fun and would love to make that. Maybe like the next Hamsters game should be complicated machines. And that's a great idea.
See, there's another hand up. Did you have a question for us?
Who was the artist and how did they come up with the design?
That is an awesome question. So it's interesting. There's so much. It's Team Hamster, and like a lot of game making is about like teamwork. And so there wasn't really just one person who was the artist, in the way that maybe if you were illustrating a book, you might just have like one person. So we had game designers who came up with the initial idea for like what the hamster characters would look like. And then it was like one or two game designers who figured that out. And then we had one or two people who were figuring out sort of what all the art in the game should look like. But then we also worked with an animation company called Hero for Hire, who had one artist whose job was to really figure out like what all the characters would look like. And that was like her sole focus. And so, so different people coming together to figure it out. And the way that they did it, is we sort of gave them a list of ideas of what we wanted the art to be like what kind of colors and like how we wanted the art to make you feel and like how we would use the design. So we kind of gave them a list of things to think about, and we showed them some things that we liked that other people had done. That's like a big thing when you're making games, is like playing other games or reading books or just like looking for examples of things out in the world that get you really excited. And so we gave some of those to the artist. And then the artist used like all of those ingredients to put together the artwork for the games.
Yeah, I love that idea of a team's approach. We all have friends who have, different abilities and different skill sets, from art to design to visual things, and sort of just coming together to really formulate this game. It's a great idea. Remy, I see that your hand has been up and you've been patiently waiting. Did you have a question?
My question is, in the game, why is there carrots and why is there soccer balls? And that's my question.
It's a good question. It's so fun when you make games. You have to decide, like many people make decisions about every single little thing you see in a game. So like we had conversations about, should that be a carrot? Should that be a soccer ball? What should it look like? Like every little piece of art or music or everything. It's like everyone tries to be really thoughtful about everything that's in the game. And so for the soccer ball and the carrot, in the game, you can play as the different hamsters. Like you can decide if you want to be Sadie or Tasha or Mateo. And part of us thinking about them as characters, we were thinking about what are things that they like. So are there certain foods they like? Do they like sparkly things? Do they maybe like sports? And so the things that they liked then became the things that you got to collect in the game. So Mateo likes soccer, so he's got a soccer ball. I think the carrot is also Mateo. Maybe you play a lot as Mateo. I'm also a big Mateo fan. But so that's how those are like the hamster's favorite things, and we sort of base them on sort of their personalities.
I saw Santiago raise his hand and put it down, so I'm going to give him an opportunity to ask his question now.
How did you decide on what kind of things you were going to put as like the floor and the ceiling?
I love these questions. They're so like specific, and it's really great. These are all like really great game designer questions, because we do think about like the floor and the ceiling. And so the idea with the game is you're inside the walls of the school. Like that's where the maze is. Like imagine, like look at your wall, like it has an X-ray and you're like looking inside of it. And so like that's where they are. But we also wanted it to be like fun and colorful and cheerful, and the inside of your wall at home may not be that way. It's probably kind of gray. So we take some sort of artistic, liberties with that. And so we were just thinking about what would it feel like maybe if you were inside the walls of something, but also how do we make it feel cute and fun? And a lot of what we were thinking about too with the walls and the floor was making sure when you went through the game that you knew where you could go and where you couldn't. Because some of our earlier versions of the game, that wasn't clear, and kids would like think they could go in a certain spot and they get really frustrated. And then we realized, okay, well, that's because it looks like you can launch your hamster ball up there, but you can't actually do that. So part of the design wasn't just about like how it looks and making you feel like you were in that space. Part of it was also about making sure it was like really clear where you could go in the game too. It's a great question.
No, thanks for that. It seems like the floodgates have opened. We have lots of little hands raising and sort of waving at us. Daphne, I believe that you were next.
How about through every single like step or every single level you get body parts for a hamster, and then you get to make your own, and you kind of like build on to it.
I can see Shannon, my friend Shannon at PBS Kids nodding, because we actually were gonna do like a make your own hamster feature, like a game thing originally, and we didn't end up making it for a couple of different reasons, but we really like that idea. I think it would be a really great thing to do maybe in a future hamsters game or season, because we really wanted to try and like have it feel like you could like personalize your experience a little bit by like choosing what hamster to play as. But yeah, making your own hamster, I agree. I would love to do that. I think that would be really fun. And so, yeah, so again, like thinking like a game designer, we definitely had that idea. We just couldn't fit it all into this one game, but I think it would be really fun to do in a future game. We could have accessories, you could have different like fur patterns, like, and we'd love to talk to kids if we were to do that and see like what kinds of things would like you want to make with your hamster, what kinds of things, like, so it would be a really fun feature to like make with input from kids like you too.
In a game, you have to think about, your audience and our kids, and like, will they have fun playing with these characters? And so much to the point where you want to make your own and become part of that team. So yeah, that is a great idea. Great thought.
Yeah, I was thinking if I made my own hamster, I would get the kind of glasses with the nose and the mustache, and that would be my little hamster design. Forrest, I saw you raise your hand again. Did you have another question?
How many games have you made?
Oh, wow. How many games have I made? I don't know. I'm looking at Shannon, like Shannon will know. I've been working with teams that make games for about 10 years. So I bet I've probably worked on maybe 30 or 40 games, maybe. It sounds like a lot, but sometimes, like when I first started, I was a production assistant, not a producer, and like maybe my job was testing the game to see if it would break. And that was still being a part of the game, so I still like worked on the game and was on that team. But that's different from like my role now, where I sort of imagine, and help lead what the game will be. So I've worked on a lot of games, but in very, very different roles. And that's kind of what helped me learn all the different things you need to do to make a game. So yeah, I should do a count though. You're inspiring me, Forrest, to actually do a count, because that's just a guess, but I think it's a lot.
No, Melissa, I think that response was actually really cool, just to show the various aspects of kind of gaming that you've been a part of, starting from the very beginning to where you are now, kind of working your way up and learning different portions of it. I think that's kind of what we're all doing. We're learning different portions of information and trying to figure out like where we should best fit. But I see that Sophie, you also have a question. Did you want to raise your question?
My question is, how did you name the hamster?
That's a really great question. They had different names before. They had a couple of different names before. And some of the names we liked. There were other PBS Kids shows that had similar names. And so like part of when you're going to be on PBS Kids, you've got to think about what are the other games and what are the other characters. And so we wanted to make sure that like we felt like they felt unique and no one would confuse them with anybody else. So that was sort of one version of like we had some names. And then the writer, so when we did the writing, myself and another producer wrote the game scripts, but then we also had a different writer who worked on the animation scripts. His name's Ron Holsey, and he's worked on lots of PBS Kids shows. And he actually helped us come up with some different names that would we were trying to find some names that might reflect a little bit more of like the diversity of our audience. And so that's how we ended up with Mateo. That's how we ended up with Tasha in particular. And so we kind of got some other input for like what their names could be and how those names could maybe sort of be embodied in some of their characteristics. So yeah, it's like brainstorming. Everybody came up with a bunch of ideas, and then we sort of talked them through and sort of picked the ones that we thought sounded good by themselves. And then when you would say all three of their names together too, just something I wouldn't have thought of when you were trying to name characters, that you also want them to all sound good if you say all three of them. So yeah.
And Melissa and Shannon, you all are both like so creative. And I'm just curious about your own childhoods and whether or not you all watched PBS Kids kind of growing up. And if you ever thought you would sort of be in this position to create games for PBS Kids.
Yeah, Shannon, do you wanna start?
Sure. Yeah, I was a big Sesame Street kid for sure, and also Dragon Tales, which is older. And I think it was really more when I was in college. I knew I wanted to, and so I never thought growing up that my career would be in games. It was really like once I kind of became a grown up and started just like playing these games with kids and watching shows with kids. I just like loved that moment where kids got excited about something and learned. And so I kind of took that with me and started as an intern at PBS Kids about 10 years ago. And like Melissa said, kind of did all aspects of content development for PBS, and here we are.
Yeah, I was also a big PBS kid growing up. Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers in particular. Every day after school was a big Mr. Rogers fan. I also really loved playing games as a kid. I was a big Nintendo fan back then with Super Mario, and I still play my Switch now, almost every day. So I always really loved games, but never really thought that I would work in games, or even I didn't even really know that was a job. When I went to college, there weren't tablets, the cell phones weren't out. I will date myself, So I think I learned different things in school that helped me do my job now, things about being creative and how to work as a team, and things that aren't about games specifically, but that can be applied there, because I didn't even know it was a job. So I didn't try and get a job in games, but I love, like Shannon, I loved education and I loved media, and I just love the creativity of a good game, and how it can really challenge me, and how I can really learn and grow from it. And so the idea, when I did find out that I could have a job in games, the idea that I could take that experience that was so meaningful for me and help create it for other people, was really exciting.
So I mean, the guy in the corner has been waiting so long to ask his question. He's had his hand up, his Zoom hand up, and he must have loved the game because he even had a hamster that he showed off on camera. So, yes. So, what's your question, dude?
It's that what hamster would you make if you could make one?
Shannon, I really feel like either of us could probably take this question. I kind of feel like I already did. When it was really interesting to make the 3 hamster characters, because they're all based a little bit on either different people I know or things about myself. and so I kind of already feel like I personally got to make the make my own hamster, because I got to like express all of that in the three of them. I am kind of partial to like Sadie and her blue fur. It's like I do really like that like shaggy fur kind of that she has going in her glasses. So I think if I were to like visually design another hamster, I do kind of like sort of her look. Shannon, I don't know if you want to talk about unicorn hamsters, perhaps.
So yes, from the presentation, the hamsters were inspired by a hamster run game that Melissa produced and I helped work on for the Rough Ruffman show. And we just fell in love with hamsters. And so Melissa and her design team were able to make me a pink sparkly hamster, because I feel like that is my essence. And so I really enjoy, it's Tasha that loves the stickers and sparkly things. And so I feel like I embody that too.
Hey, Melissa, you in the video, one of the things you showed was that you changed the design of the hamsters. You changed their look, and I was kind of curious why you chose to do that.
That is a really good question, because when I started, because I'm mostly a games producer, and so when we were moving them from just being in games to being in videos, I was like, well, we've already got the character design. We're done, right? We're good, because I loved them. I thought they were so adorable. And part of learning how animation is produced, and this was working with some of my colleagues and the animation team, I sort of learned that there are places they were going to be in the videos, like they might be standing on a table and their little pink feet maybe wouldn't show up on like a table, or in a video you might want to be able to spot them like in silhouette or in shadow. And so like in the game, they're all exactly the same shape, but like people aren't all the same shape and size. And so part of like trying to make them actually feel like they're each unique characters was making, someone's a little taller, someone's a little wider, or their fur is shaggy. Like it was, I think in the game, they weren't really meant to be full, like fleshed, real characters. They didn't have names or personalities, even though they were like super cute. So a big part of why we changed them was, one, so that they could like work in animation, which, as I learned, has different rules and than like games do. And then the other was just to try and really make them feel different and like they really were like full. I was going to call them people, but kind of, like we're really trying to make them feel like they each were special and different the way that people are.
Yeah, great. And I actually had a question. I mean, Brian's question was wonderful, so I want to kind of follow up on it and just thinking about how do you meet the needs of students with disabilities or different abilities? Just noting that, we have, young learners who think differently or have different physical abilities, and just curious sort of how do you make the game available to them the way you would for all other kids?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we and PBS Kids are thinking about sort of from the very beginning. PBS Kids has great universal design for learning standards, which is a long phrase, but it's a way to say we're trying to think early on about sort of how you interact, like how you maybe touch things in the game, or what kind of challenges we're giving you in the game, how we're motivating you, like all those kinds of things that we're trying to think about very early on. And we had an advisor who was just focused around that, and she looked at everything that we did and sort of was able to point out if there were things like if maybe something didn't have the right amount of contrast. So like maybe something was like might be hard to see if you were low vision, or she might help us see if there's some decisions about like how you might move things on a screen that might be tricky if you had a mobility challenge. And so we had these guidelines and we worked with an advisor, and those were some of the ways. And then also I would say just thinking about having like all the games that we made have sort of a guided mode and then a free play mode. And that was another way too, to just think about that kids like to approach learning differently, and sort of giving them some room to explore, and then also some room to have something more instructional was just part of the whole design. So lots of thinking up front and then working with that advisor along the way. And also just making sure we're on as many devices and tablets. And I know you asked about accessibility in that sense, but also we spent a lot of time too making sure that if you have an older device, a newer device, if you're on a desktop, if you're on a phone, so that we can also just sort of meet all the different kids, regardless of like what kind of technology they have available too. And if Shannon, there's anything else you would add to that?
Yeah. Universal Design for Learning was a huge part of the work that went into Team Hamsters and other work funded by Ready to Learn Department of Education and CBB. So the multiple modes of play, like Melissa said, having being able to play on your own and learn more as a maker and build your own level or go through the guided levels, that is so truly important. That we saw a lot in play testing that some kids would lean heavily on one or the other. And so making sure that the learning impact that kids that like to play in these different ways we were able to get across was key. So.
No, that's great. That's great. I want to thank you both for your time. This has been amazing. And hopefully our young friends on the line also enjoyed. I think we actually, before we wrap, we may have a question for Magnolia and Joaquin. Do we have a question for them or from them?
No. But Joaquin and Magnolia were some of our first play testers on Team Hamster. So I just wanted to make sure we said hello to them and thank them for play testing with us for all the Team Hamster games.
Yeah, and I can definitely tell from your games that kid input is very important. Really getting a sense of how things will land once it publishes is very important early on. And I know you very much value the input from those on the line and those that have sort of had a chance to view the game prior to it being released. So I mean, I've enjoyed my time with you. I hope you guys have enjoyed your time with us. Santiago, Forrest, what do you all say? Have you enjoyed your time with us today?
Yeah.
It was great?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we've enjoyed having you. And so I think with that, we will say farewell. It was great, Daphne. We got a thumbs up from Daphne. Awesome. And a wave from our young friend up there. Great. Well, we've enjoyed having you. This has been very important. We at the U.S. Department of Education definitely value these opportunities to work closely with our partners or our grantees, but also work closely with kids. And so we just enjoy seeing you. This has been a very interesting time in education, but we know that you guys are really doing well and doing your best. So we're excited to see you. So thank you for joining us.